Welcome back. Now we're focusing on this bailout funds. We've got the General Secretary of NLC, Dr. Peter Ozoesan. He joins us from Abuja. Good morning, and thank you for joining us today. Well, let's go ahead and get your response about this, because we've seen the arguments coming from the governors. They need these funds as budget support, as well as pay salaries in their states such that the states can move on. But Labour, you've got a perspective. What do you think about the bailout funds as they are being given to the governors?
Well, I think that the first thing is to distinguish between the outright bailout funds and the payment of the pari exit refunds. The Paris Club exit refunds were actually deductions that were made from states' funds, and they were over-deducted. And I think that that is legitimately amounts that should ultimately be refunded to the states based on the amounts that were over-deducted from each state. Having said that, however, the history is that even the 50% that has been released in two tranches of the pari exit funds have in some way been released as a cushion and as a bailout to allow the states to be able to pay backlogs of salaries and pensions that they owed to workers and pensioners. To the extent that the governors themselves used the argument of the need to pay back, to be able to meet their wage bills and pay the backlog of salaries as an argument for taking the tranches, particularly the second tranche that was the last to be released. To that extent, we now find that the argument is situated within the framework of a bailout. If you make an undertaking that you were going to use a substantial part of the amount to be released to you, 50% I think was the figure that the governors themselves volunteered and agreed to, would be used to defray salaries and pensions, then you must leave to that undertaking. But a situation in which these funds are released, and of course some of the governors in the states do not use the money to defray the backlog of such debts, then something we feel that it is improper. And increasingly, we are wary of the fact that workers' salaries, debts owed to workers, is becoming an instrument that some of the governors are using to solicit for the release of these funds. And we think that that is wrong. Between the federal government and the state governments, they can go ahead and talk how they will balance their books. But clearly, states that have shown themselves historically not to have been able to properly utilize such funds, we believe that they have no justification, morally or otherwise, to be looking for another tranche to be released to them. They need to transparently demonstrate what use they have put the amounts that were released ab initio before they start coming for to make cases for other releases.
What about when?
Let us make it clear, however.
Yeah, let me just bring this in. Pardon me. But what about when they say that, well, yes, they might have agreed to go about it in a certain way, but they argue that they also do have a lot of needs in the state, so they can't just pay only the workers in the states, and then infrastructure development suffers. Because as a matter of fact, they say, look, this is budget support. So yes, they can pay the teachers as much as they can, but they argue that, but they also have to develop infrastructure. Is that tenable to you?
Of course they have to develop infrastructure. What needs to be done is the level of fiscal discipline that they are able to put in place and the type of priorities that they are able to set. But for any individual or organization, if you owe a backlog of debts, because that's what these are amounts that have been earned by workers. And 8 months' salaries, in some cases, are not paid. These are debts. You don't go into new ventures until you clear your debts. So we are saying that, yes, properly setting priorities, including infrastructural development and other forms of development, they need to pay attention to defraying the debts that they have cumulatively owed over a period. And we're not saying take this amount and hand over just to workers. What was agreed was that a substantial part, and I said 50%, for instance, of the last release was expected at least to be used in defraying such debts. But when no such things happen, and even there is no transparent way of even verifying what use some of the funds have been put into, there have been allegations of diversions and all that. And I think that these are issues that we need to engage.
Let me come in here and ask you, because this seems to have come from, should I say, a genesis point when states were unable to pay salaries. Do you foresee a situation where more demands come for bailout funds like this that we have seen? We've seen the first tranche, the second tranche, the third tranche. Perhaps we'll have a fourth, fifth, and sixth. What do you think? And what should states be doing? What should the federal government even do to ensure that we don't go the way of borrowing or giving out bailouts all the time?
Well, I think the starting point is actually to find a way to institute a transparent and a prudent fiscal management at the level of governments, whether at the state level or at the federal level. That is one. A second is some of the amounts being mentioned, we believe are not are genuine. For instance, when I heard the governor of Benue State, and we've engaged with them, and he's been pushing this position, that the wage bill of the state is 7.8 billion. We think that there are things that may not be correct. And we are working, and we are ready to continue to work with different levels of government to come to grips with the realities, to identify what is the correct wage bill, so that people are not hemorrhaging the system by using the nomenclature of wage bill and passing other things through them.